Hello and welcome to the Kennesaw State Paulding Site Early Childhood Education Workshop 2018. Today we will be covering organization and time management, the case study, the math lesson plan, the ELA lesson plan, and APA formatting. Organization and time management. Get a planner and a calendar. Write out your big assignments and due dates in the calendar and in your planner. Write out what you want to accomplish and when and what days you will do it and stick to it. If you do not, you will get behind. Here's an example of what one of our classmates did. So she wrote what was due each week, and we were sure to keep to that schedule and just check mark off as we go. Here's also some examples of a calendar where we have assignments and big assignments coming up, and we would also reflect that onto our personal planner. And in our planners, you will see where we crossed out and had certain days where we did certain assignments. The case study. Here are the steps to the case study. First, you identify a student on your first day in the field. This is based off of who the teacher identifies as a struggling student in the area of ELA or reading. Get parent permission form signed and back ASAP. It's a good idea to send one home with 3 to 5 students to see which one brings it back the fastest. This helps to avoid any issue of not receiving one back at all. Remember, you cannot work with the student if you do not have parent permission. The third part of the case study is a community school student observation assignment. Basically, you will walk around the school and the community and write a paper based on the guidelines. Next, you'll conduct pre-assessments with the selected student that you have identified with your teacher. The pre-assessment consists of the primary spelling inventory, the running record, writing sample, phonics, decoding/sounds for early grades. Next, you will score the pre-assessments. Each of them are scored differently, and it is not difficult to do so at all. One of the last few things that you will do is write a paper on pre-assessment analysis. This will include the next steps, which you will base your lesson plans off of, which should be standards based along with the consideration of the student's struggle areas. After that, you'll write lesson plans. Remember, these lesson plans are based on ELA, no other subject. After that, you will conduct your lesson plans. The library is a great place to go with your student. It's quiet and the librarian is there. Remember, you cannot be alone with your students, so the library is always a great choice, or even the hallway. Lastly, you will write a paper on how the lesson plans went. Refer back to the pre-assessment analysis and touch on what areas the student improved on. Remember that the case study will be susceptible to some changes, whether they reduce the amount of lesson plans or how they want your paper outlined, or even the pre-assessments, whether they'll require a running record or whatever. But it probably will stay the same, but just be on your toes that there might be changes. And I just wanted to highlight again to get your parent permission form signed and send it home with 3 to 5 students. You cannot, and I repeat, you cannot work with the student if you do not get parent permission. Next, we will be talking about lesson planning. You will be making lesson plans for many of your classes, but the 2 that we think were most important to review were the ones for your ELA and math classes because of how much goes into it. Typically, we would help you guys work through one, but because this is an online version, you may feel free to work on one on your own, but we will definitely talk about the different steps that goes into making one.
Okay, so for all of your math lesson plans, you are going to be doing a workshop model. So what that means is there is a 3-part lesson plan. You're going to have an opening, a work time, and a closing. And so the KSU lesson plan template that they provide for you for the math classes, your 4408 and your 4409, they provide the template for you. So it's already set up to be a 3-part lesson. So you always start with your content practice standards. Obviously, we have to know what we're teaching. So this content standard is MGSE1 OA6. You will learn this a little bit, or sooner rather than later, what the letters in the standard mean, but this specific one, the 1 is for first grade, OA is operations and algebraic thinking, and then that number 6 means it's the 6th standard in the OA list of standards. So this specific standard says add and subtract to 20. You're also going to incorporate the SMPs, which are standards of mathematical practice. These specific 3 that are listed, SMP 4, 5, and 1, you're going to incorporate these into just about every mathematics lesson plan that you write. Math workshop is geared towards modeling with mathematics. You're always going to include a manipulative, so that's why you're going to include SMP4 in all of your lessons. The 5 is that they know how to use those manipulatives strategically and appropriately. And then the 1 you're going to include because it's a math problem and make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. That's in every math test that you give any student. So on the next little box on the KSU math template, it's what materials you're going to need. And here is where you're going to list everything that you're going to use or you'll need to be able to do this lesson. So it's always going to include a manipulative, like I said. When you're doing a workshop, you're going to do something that it's not math related. So you're going to watch a video, you're going to read a book, you're going to ask an engaging question, something that is not math related. So for this specific lesson plan that Genesis created, she has counters, pencils or markers, paper, and the book. She's reading The Incredible Book Eating Boy by Oliver Jeffers read aloud video on YouTube. So she's going to incorporate a YouTube video where they're going to read that book for her. And then she also just uses the initials of the students. You always want to do that because anything you submit to KSU, you don't want to include the student's full name for confidentiality reasons. So the next box is I can or essential question. For the lower grades, you're going to use an I can. The upper grades, you'll use the essential question, the EQ. You can Google I can statements for first grade 081, 086, and someone has already made a list of I can statements and even EQs as well. There's a saying, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So if you're having a hard time, don't spend a lot of time on these I can and essential questions. It's all based off of that standard up there at the top that you listed. So that is add and subtract within 20, and your I can statement is I can add within 20. So next we're going to move on to the actual math workshop 3-part lesson. So like I said, there's an opening. This opening is, what is your favorite food? My favorite food is pizza. And you see how it has nothing to do with math. That's the main thing. You want to engage the students and do something that's not math related for this opening. So another thing that you're going to do is after you read the book or have the YouTube video read the book for your students, you're going to do a number talk. And if you've never heard of a number talk, it's a quick little thing that gets the students thinking about math. You can do it however you want. You can have something already put together on a slideshow or you can do little index cards with dots. And so for this specific number talk, it's Henry loved to eat those books. What if Henry had 10 joke books and Sally gave him 4 more? How many joke books would he have now? So that's the question that you're going to ask the students. And then when you're going to give them some think time, you're going to say, put your thumb up when you have the answer in your head. And then they're going to answer that question. And you're going to, let them know that now we're about to do a task. So for the work time, you're going to, and for your math lessons, you're going to have to label the types of problem. So that's why it says there with guiding question, label types of problem. This specific problem is part whole part unknown. So you'll learn more about that in your Van de Waal book for 4408. The task for the work time, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to have these tasks printed on little sheets of paper. And they're going to glue these tasks into their their math journal. And then they're going to glue it at the very top, and then they have the rest of the page to work it. Well, for you, if you're going to be working in small group, you may want to go ahead and print the task on a separate sheet of paper so that way you can turn it in as student work samples for your chalk and wire. But you're just going to have this task right here. It says Henry has 5 history books and 10 joke books. How many books did he have for dinner? Explain your thinking your thinking or answer in pictures, numbers, and words. And that is the other biggie. That is one of the things that Math Workshop is so, geared toward. They want the students showing their work using pictures, numbers, and words, and that's that that's that conceptual understanding that they're gaining there. They're gonna see it, and prove it multiple ways. So, some guiding questions during this work time. You're not teaching. You are letting them work, and you can ask, these are just some examples of questions you may want to ask as you're walking around and making sure that the students are on task and, they're not drifting off into la la land. You want them to be doing math the whole time. So can you make a prediction about this problem? Can you solve it a different way? What are you thinking? How did you figure that out? So these are just some questions that you may want to go around to just keep the students focused on math. So after about 25-30 minutes of work time, when you're walking around, you're going to pick 3 students, 3 to 5. Usually you only really have time for 3, but you're going to pick 3 students. And it doesn't matter if they have the right answer. It doesn't matter what, model they did. You just are picking 3. And you're going to say, hey, Sam, whenever we get done and we're back on the carpet, do you mind just writing how you solved this in your pictures, numbers, and words up on the board for the whole class to see? And so you're going to do that for 3 students. And once all the students are done with the work time, they're going to put their pencils down. They're going to go back to the front of the room, the carpet, whatever area for group share. And they're going to draw their problem, how they solved it. This is where, you're going to say, oh, put your thumb up by your heart if you solved it like Sam did. And, students are going to put their thumb up by their heart or whatever. And then they're going to go on and you're going to listen to Katie and then Matthew. They're going to also draw their problem up on the board. And you're going to say, oh, well, who did it Katie's way? Put your thumb up by your heart. Well, who did it like Matthew? So this is just allowing students to hear it explained different ways from their peers, and they also can just see it worked out in different ways. So maybe if one student, has problems with how they solve it, then they can say, oh, next time I think I'm going to solve it the way Katie did it, because that made more sense to me. Then, after all of the students have shared, you're going to solve it. And this is where you're going to give the answer. You're going to clear up any of the misconceptions about maybe some of the vocabulary that was within the standard or anything like that. And then you're done. So that's Math Workshop, opening, work time and closing. Some notes for differentiation. You're going to include these on your math and your ELA lesson plans, but you're always going to have a challenge. So for those students who are, ready to move on, they got it, you may give them some bigger numbers. For those students who you need maybe struggling and you need to scaffold some, you're going to just make those small numbers smaller. You could also restate it with different vocabulary, include more visuals. And that's another thing for EL students. For EL students, you can preview the book maybe and go over any vocabulary with them prior to doing this lesson. You can underline keywords. You can translate some of the words if they need. You can also decrease the numbers for them and always include more visuals. So this is an example of a math workshop lesson plan, and we will go into...
Now that we have looked at a math lesson plan, we're going to take a look at the ELA lesson plan. So just remember that this ELA lesson plan is a part of your case study, and you will have more than one. More than likely, you'll either have 6 or 3. It does change ever so often, so just be aware of that. So, of course, you see here, you put your name, Then you put your central focus, which is your spelling or mine was syllables and spelling in this case. Spelling was one of the lesson plan requirements that were required, as well as other ones. Then your lesson objective, which is the student will improve spelling by applying grade level phonics and word analysis skills and decoding words, as well as recognizing syllabication patterns. So just remember, your lesson objective is based off of your standard, and it's what will the student do? The student will improve spelling, but how? So remember, you put the how in your lesson objective. So then here you have the standard, and just put the code here. And then you'll have your grade level. In this case, mine was 5th grade. And then the time frame, and it's an estimate, and I estimated mine to be about 30 to 45. And sometimes you will go a little under or over, and that's okay. And if you scroll down, you see the standards, and this time it's written out, so just write it down in this box. And then you see the lesson objective again, and I just stated as a result of this project. Then I said the objective, and then I talked about the concentration of the student. So the concentration is the student improving in spelling and syllabication pattern to aid them in spelling as they struggled with syllables while spelling. See, I always made it to where they understood that the reason behind this lesson. And it's important that the people reading your lesson plan know this. So then I have the key words, which is determine, apply, know, recognize. And these are kind of like the vocabulary that will be seen in your lesson plan. And then you have to justify the lesson purpose. So my justification was my learner is a 5th grader, and I am doing this lesson because the student reflected in assessments that they struggle with spelling words, especially in the syllables and affixes spelling inventory stage. And you can see here where I pasted the actual pre-assessment of the student. So here's where you justify your reasoning. Next is the box potential misconceptions. This is where you kind of talk about what could go wrong with your lesson, or what's a potential thing that can go wrong, like whether it be student understanding or just the way things flow. So I just said that my student may not recognize the purpose for them to understand syllabication patterns and skills to spell words. Then you have your academic language. So some of the main things you need to know about this is the language function and the academic vocabulary and language. So my language function was applying and recognizing. It's what they will be doing. And then I have my academic vocabulary and language, which is basically how it circulates around syllables. So for some, it could be decoding and stuff like that. So then you come to the formative or summative assessment box. This is where you kind of input the assessments you'll be using during the we do, you do. Obviously, you don't need it for the I do because you're not assessing yourself. So for the we do, I talked about what I would be doing with that, which was putting sticky notes on pages. And the student is to identify the syllabication pattern and write the word out. So I did this with them. And by doing this together, I let them do what I wrote here. And I was to determine if they were able to go on to the you do, where they work on something by themselves. So then in the you do, I did, the student will be given 5 words on a sheet to determine the pattern and then spell the word on the sheet provided. In this instance, I'm not helping them at all because it is the you do portion, and I determined they would be fine to do this in the we do. So then you come to the challenge, and in the challenge, it's if the student was successful. I will ask them to spell the words without looking at their sheet. This way they can apply what they know about syllabication patterns and how they can use it to aid them in spelling long words. They will be given a sheet of paper to write their words. So you only do this if they were very successful in the you do. Basically, if they get in 100 and they feel that they can do more of a challenge, this is when you give it to them. So then the criterion. This is basically how you're grading them. So for the we do, I had a checklist and I answered these questions. For the you do, I basically graded 3 out of 5 to express understanding, and the challenge was the same thing, 3 out of 5 for understanding. Then differentiation. For differentiation, remember to list your ELL students, your gifted, and your IEP students, and your visual motor impairment students. It's kind of like what we did for the math ELA or the math one, where we talked about more visuals for ELL students, a more challenging task for your gifted students, and just different ways of going about the lesson for your IEP students and your visual motor students. And then materials needed. So you list what you will be using as a teacher and what the student will be using. So, for example, I put the book I'm using, the syllable video, the Gold Rush video, the sticky notes, the whiteboard, stuff like that. And the student basically using the same thing. Just make sure you say that. And then we get down to the anticipatory set, lesson introduction modeling. So I listed here, you'll list your content-specific language. So content-specific, which mine was syllable patterns, because it's about the content. And then you do the text and purpose introduction. So how you are going to introduce the text or whatever you're reading. So I said I will start by asking them if they are familiar with the Gold Rush, and then I give them some background on the Gold Rush, and that's when I pull the video and let them watch that. And then I said I will also state that they are going to be what they're going to be doing with the text, which is recognizing syllable patterns. Then we review syllables. The student has learned about syllable patterns a long time ago, around second grade, so they do know what syllable patterns are. I believe they do know how it can aid them when spelling and how they can apply it. To refresh them on the concept, I will develop syllable patterns in the I do portion. So this is where you review syllables, just so that the student is aware of what they are doing. So then here you have the dialogue of how that part will go. It is important that you do include dialogue in your lesson plan so that they know what you're going to be doing, although obviously your student's not going to exactly say what you type, but it's good to kind of have an idea. So if someone was to teach your lesson, they kind of know how to go about that. And then I wrote here kind of like the transition. This is when we watch the video. This is when we read the story together. Now, to remember that your lessons are guided reading centered. So make sure you have a book on the student's reading level because they will be reading it with you. So then the actual lesson. So then the I do portion. The I do portion is basically what you will be doing, and the student really will just be listening. So here I have the dialogue of how I introduce the lesson and where the lesson will take place. Make sure you do add that where the lesson will take place, which for me, it was the library. So I said this lesson will take place in the library at a table with the student and teacher side by side. The teacher will start by introducing the guided reading text and then explaining what they are going to be doing with syllables and spelling. So here I introduce the book and the whole idea of syllables and how I got stuck on a word and how I use syllables to help me. So that's kind of like, in a way, an introduction and a hook. And the student, you write what the student says, which obviously they won't always say that. So then I put a note here saying, I will continue to recognize the syllable patterns of hard words. So you're modeling what the student will be doing, which is identifying certain words and breaking them down to syllables so that they can actually spell and understand the word more fluidly. And then I have my transition here when we do the guided reading together. So in the we do, it's important to remember to have certain guiding questions like, what do you think will happen next? Or does it sound right? Does it look right? So here you'll see where I put dialogue of when we're doing the we do together, where we stop at the highlighted word and break down the syllable patterns together so that they can kind of get the concept or regain that syllable pattern understanding. And here are some more guiding questions and just a dialogue of us doing it together. And then you transition into the you do. So in the you do, I'm basically giving the student a sheet of paper with words, and I want them to break down the syllable pattern so that they kind of understand that concept. But they will have the words in front of them so that they're not completely lost. And here you'll see the dialogue where I said, now that we've read this story together, I'm going to give you a list of words and going to do the same thing we've been doing together, which is recognize the syllable pattern of a word and write it down. And I keep on telling them, remember to apply this skill when you get stuck on spelling or reading a word in the future. Do you understand what you are doing? And then hopefully the students should repeat that back to you and they get started on the you do portion. And then for closure, you review what you did. I asked them what are syllable patterns, and they should tell you, hopefully. And they should also model exactly what it is. And then that's when you close up and introduce them. Okay, this is what we will be doing next time I see you. And that's it. And then For reteaching, you don't have to reteach if the student needs it, they didn't understand it. But do write in this box what you would do if you had to. And that's it for that. And then, of course, down here you do a reflection, answer the reflection questions, which are just based on how the lesson went, what you think you can do better and stuff like that. And then in your appendix, you put your assessments and stuff like that. And that's really it for the ELA lesson plan.
So the last thing that we wanted to talk about was APA. So I know that in your Highlands classes for 1101 and 1102, a lot of you are really familiar with MLA. Unfortunately, KSU for the ECE program anyways, it may be different for others, we use APA format. So we have included the link to the Al Purdue resource guide to APA. If it were me, I would just go ahead and print the instructions for title page, how to do a running head, how to do headings, abstracts, and then, obviously in-text citations and how to set up your resource page, because a lot of times, that's going to be the main thing that you will get taken off for is APA formatting mistakes. So we have included this link. Just click on it and you can bookmark it or you can print pages directly from it. And I would just save them and know them like the back of your hand. That way you don't lose points on assignments. So thank you for watching this video, and we hope you guys learned a lot from it.